I want to just add a few verses to what Lee read. So after he says, "For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted," Jesus said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Well, he's got it right. Jesus is at a banquet. And it's at the house of a leader of Pharisees. There are several local religious leaders that are present. And before this text starts today, Jesus heals a man of dropsy and immediately asks the religious leaders if he thinks they should have done this. Now, we saw last week that the religious leaders of the day were fundamentalists because Jesus had healed a woman on the Sabbath, and they saw the law as a restrictive rule rather than a liberating principle. So we know, and Jesus knows, that they're going to oppose him healing this man of dropsy on the Sabbath. But Jesus argues that if their child or ox fell into a well on the Sabbath, wouldn't they save it? And the Pharisees can't answer. And then Jesus notices those who got there early were nabbing the seats of honor. Evidently, they didn't have enough papyrus scrolls to cut up and put little names and make little, place settings for people, telling them where they are. So they eat at a low table. They're all sitting down. At one end is where the host sits. That's the place of honor. And if you can sit closer to him, there's a hierarchical statement that's made at dinner tables. Those of more honor sit closer to the host. So some of them are sneaking in and trying to get as close as they can. Maybe then people will think a little more highly of them than they did before. But Jesus notices this and says, whoa, there's a problem here with this. It's funny. It's like a Little Miss Manners kind of thing that he's doing here. It seems a little odd to me at first because he's saying, you could be embarrassed. And the host could come because somebody who has a higher place than you in the hierarchy of religious leadership and in front of everyone have to move you to a lower seat. Boo. Not good. You'd be disrespected in front of everyone. But on the other hand, if you were to take a seat that's the lowest seat, and then the host wants to come and move you up higher, he would come and everybody would be looking. And you would stand up and he'd take you to a higher seat and ta-da! That's a good part of a little wisdom there, isn't it? It's not such a stupid thing. I mean, it's a little odd to me because, I don't think of Jesus giving, Little Miss Manners kind of conferences for people. But I can imagine that everybody there is kind of nodding their heads, going, yeah, good idea, Jesus. Let me write that one down. The next time, sit at the lowest table. Of course, everybody will be going to the lowest spot now at the next party. But you can see that. Then the quote gets tossed in. And the quote is, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, this is a theme that has been running in the book of Luke since the very first chapter, verse 52, when Mary sings her song about the birth of Jesus and says that God will bring down the mighty from their thrones and will lift up the lowly. This is a thread that runs all the way through the book. So here it is again. Humble yourselves. Who will do the humbling and the exalting? Well, the implication is that God will do the humbling and the exalting. And if you exalt yourself, you remember the proverb, pride goeth before a fall? Yeah, well, here it is in another sense. Humility is this word which you probably know, comes from an ancient Greek word, which the word humus comes from, dirt, soil, and the word human also comes from. Humility means, that root word means earth or on the ground. And the implication is that everyone is at the same level. That no other human being is any worse than any other human being, regardless of social position. A successful CEO and his wife took a Sunday afternoon drive near the little country town where she grew up. He stopped to fill the car with gas, and he went to the bathroom. When he returned, he saw that she was inside talking to the manager who was behind the counter. He waited for her. She got in the car. They drove off, and he said to her, "Who is that fellow you were talking to?" And she said, "Well, that's a guy I used to date in high school. He manages this service station." And he said, "Well, aren't you lucky? I came along, and now you're married to a CEO. You could have been married to a gas station manager." "No," she said, "if you hadn't come along and I'd married him, he'd be the CEO and you'd be the gas station manager." Humility! Regardless of social position or wealth, or no one is any lesser than you or me. Secondly, and this I get messed up here a little bit, or I used to. That is, sometimes we see humility as meaning that we are a doormat. That we're automatically lay ourselves down and let other people walk on us. But this is not what humility means. Humility is an honest appraisal of yourself without judgment. It's an honest appraisal of yourself without judgment. Henry Augustus Rowland, professor of physics at Johns Hopkins University, was once called as an expert witness at a trial. And during the cross-examination, a lawyer demanded, "What are your qualifications as an expert witness in this case?" And the normally modest and retiring professor replied quietly. He said, "I am simply the greatest living expert on the subject under discussion." Later, a friend well acquainted with Rowland's modesty expressed surprise at the professor's uncharacteristic answer. And Rowland said to him, "Well, what did you expect me to do? I was under oath." Don't be afraid to tell the truth about yourself. Don't play yourself short. That is not helpful to anyone. We are all children of God who have been given gifts. We all live in the fragile reality of human life, blessed with the remarkable beauty of this world and joined with the hopes and dreams of other human beings. We all have different histories, different DNA, different talents, facing different situations, different challenges. We have different weaknesses and different strengths. But these differences do not constitute a scale of comparison for value and worth. Humility is the ability to know your own worth without comparing yourself to others up or down. That, to me, is the center of it. Humility is the ability to know your own value or worth without comparing yourself to anyone else, up or down. Does that make sense? Bob's got a funny look on his face. Oh, no, you're good. I just wanted to check out and make sure. Does make sense. All right. Thank you. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, point you out as a way of, no. So, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. There's the little proverb that Jesus uses, but he doesn't stop there because he's got them nodding and smiling. So he goes from their petty individual behavior to the whole social structure. You see, self-promotion in the ancient world is a set of concentric circles. You promote yourself, your family, your tribe, your nation. And these concentric circles of loyalty become your identity. And the most important thing is to climb the ladder inside your circle. So the one with the seat closest to the host gets the most, yes. But the next level of the game is to invite those above you to your banquet. Because then, hopefully, they will invite you back in return. It's all calculated self-promotion. There's not a shred of hospitality in it. And these folks see themselves as good people. They follow all the religious rules. They give alms to the poor. They say their prayers. They go to the synagogue on Sabbath. And by the rules, they are holy and pure. But those very rules, those concentric circles, keep the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind in poverty without resources. And it's not any individual's fault. It's a self-serving system of which they have little to no awareness because it's like the air they breathe. It's just the way things are. I mean, can you imagine how they must respond to Jesus' next words of advice? Can you imagine them inviting the sick, the poor? I mean, can you imagine if Jesus walked in today and said, by the way, I don't want you inviting your friends over anymore. What I'd like you to do is go find some people who are poor, who are sick, who are marginalized in some way, people who don't have friends, and I want you to invite them. Oh, but what about those other folks? I really have a good time with them. All right, so maybe invite a few of those too, fine. But the point is, how are you going to know who these people are and what their lives are like unless you actually do this wonderful thing, which is sit at table with them? That is the thing that I think is the genius of all of this. Okay, Lee, you're right. So, here's the thing about eating. It's a very big deal. You know, of course, it's not quite as big these days as it used to be, but it is something to sit down with other people at a table and actually open your home, your food, your hospitality to them. And to look across the table into their eyes and to know something about who it is that they are and to let them know something about who it is that you are. It is no small thing. You know, I really like Granby, but doggone it, we live in these individual houses, you know, and I used to live in the city in Chicago, and you could put together, kind of cobble together a meal with neighbors down the block and parents of kids that you knew who were from a couple blocks over, and suddenly, I don't know quite how it happened, but people would show up, you know, on our third-story porch in the back. They'd say, "Oh yeah, I've got some of this." And that's getting closer to the idea, you know. But what if we actually took Jesus seriously at this? I mean, it would blow away our social structure too. I mean, what if we said, okay, 1 meal a month. What we're going to go do is we're going to go find somebody who we don't really know very well. We might know their name or something, and we're going to invite them over. Maybe they can't get around. People who don't generally have a community in which to live. See, this is what Jesus is going for. Jesus is going for the creation of a community that breaks down all the barriers of any other community. You know, of these closed circles. That's what Jesus is going for. It's a radical thing in that world. It's a radical thing in our world. It's no small vision that he holds up for us. And frankly, I don't know how to accomplish it except in the community that Jesus created. Although, I mean, you know, true confession, Sally and I don't go out, you know, on Friday nights and try to find homeless people and bring them home to our place to eat. It would be interesting to give it a shot sometime, but we don't do that. But what we have is this community. What we have is this community right here. Look here. Into which we baptize Samantha. But we don't baptize Samantha because she's special in some way, although let me tell you, you know, every baby is special, right? We don't baptize her because her family is nobility and they are a cut above everybody else, although I happen to know these people and these are good human beings. We don't baptize her because she has some special talent or gift or something, you know, she just cries and googles and poops and, you know, that's what she does. We baptize her into this community because this is the community in which every child is welcome. This is a community in which red and yellow, black and white, they're all welcome. Poor and rich, they're all welcome. Sick or healthy, they're all welcome. Boy or girl, they're all welcome. This is why we baptize her, because this is the community that Jesus created. A community that would break all other loyalties and feed on the blessing of God's love. Amen, Samantha? Yeah.